Welcome to Whole Health. We're happy you're here on this journey of exploration with us as we learn what it means to live a life dedicated to spiritual, mental, and physical health. Before we begin our program, we want to share a brief legal disclaimer. The information provided on this program, including any health-related advice or discussions, is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult a qualified healthcare professional before making any decisions regarding your health. Now, let's turn it over to Pastor Jeremy, Dr. Kala Kleen, and Brittany Pfeiffer for today's episode of Whole Health.
Welcome back to Whole Health. I'm Pastor Jeremy, and I'm here with Dr. Kala and Brittany, and I'll tell you what, I'm excited to have this conversation. The fact is, the things that we're talking about today are things that I've been thinking a lot about, actually looking into on my own, and even sharing in some of these things in my own household over the last 9 months or so. And so I'm really excited to hear the heart of these ladies on these subjects. Today we're talking about heat, cold, and frequency, sauna, cold plunge, red light therapy, and even PEMF, pulsed electromagnetic field therapy. These are tools that have exploded in popularity, and here's what I love about it. People want to take ownership of their health, and that's a good thing. They want resilience. They want strength. But here's what we need to ask. Are we using these tools wisely? Are we using them correctly? There's a difference between stress that strengthens and stress that overwhelms. Scripture talks about refinement, fire that purifies, but it also warns about burdens that can crush. And so today we're unpacking what the science actually says. Not hype, not fear, just physiology and wisdom. And so Brittany, let's get started. Let's talk about sauna therapy.
Absolutely. So sauna is one of the most studied longevity tools that we have. There's a lot of research that comes out of Finland. Over there, it's estimated that they have about 3 million saunas for a population of like 5.6 million people. So that's like,
that's fascinating.
The ratio.
Wow.
Yeah, it's an insane ratio, right? So in Finland, many of the people sauna like 3 to 5 times a week consistently over decades. So we have a large study followed around 2,000 middle-aged men for more than 20 years. And those who use the sauna 4 to 7 times per week had significantly lower rates of cardiovascular mortality, sudden cardiac death, and all-cause mortality. So like that's pretty good data.
That's pretty major when it comes to, hey, living a better life, a longer life. So I love hearing that.
Yeah. Well, and I'm going to interject too, because the thing that's so interesting about the Finnish studies is that we know categorically the further away you live from the equator, all-cause mortality, all health consequences literally go through the roof the further away you are from the equator. And so like you can compare Finland to Alaska or like to a lot of like those upper northern Canadians. And so the Finnish studies are very interesting based on the access to sauna therapy alone. And they've even done studies like coastal Finnish, like if you live near the coast versus if you live more north in the mountains further away from the coast, that then they'll see health decline. So there's a big correlation between their omega-3 consumption and vitamin D consumption based on the fish.
Wow.
So the Finnish studies are very like engaging and eye-opening, especially like this is literally just sweat therapy.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And functionally, there's a lot of alcoholics in Finland because it's dark all the time.
Interesting.
And so it's really, the Finnish studies are very fascinating, but sweat therapy, by and large, on the Finnish studies, blow it out of the water, that show.
Yeah. And I think people love that because, you can just sit there and start to sweat significantly, depending on the sauna that you're using, some quicker than others. But, it's not putting in a whole lot of effort. But I think the effort's important too. Another conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So if we can talk about like what happens biologically when we sauna, right? So your core temperature is rising, and that you have heat shock proteins that activate. Those help to repair damaged proteins and you protect your cells. Your blood vessels dilate. That improves your endothelial function. Basically, like we don't want like hard, stiff arteries and blood vessels. Right. So this is really helpful for that. Your heart rate rises, and sometimes like you even get like a cardio benefit from it, from being in the sauna. Nitric oxide increases. That helps your oxygen delivery. That helps boost your immune system, things like that. And growth hormone temporarily increases, which is really interesting. So growth hormone is really helpful for skeletal muscle and decreasing body fat, helps your bone strength, your metabolism, and improves your exercise capacity, energy levels, like really, really great benefits. So you get a lot of growth hormone when you sleep. Right. But also when you sauna. So that's a good midday boost. Helps improve circulation, which is helpful. Like if you have people who really struggle in wintertime when it's cold, this is really helpful for that. and it helps decrease inflammation markers. So basically it's like giving your cardiovascular system like training without all the joint stress. So if people are not able to do those types of workouts, this is a good option for them.
Sure.
There's also brain health benefits as well. So reduced risk of Alzheimer's and dementia because
that's good to hear.
Yeah. So those heat shock proteins, they increase something called BDNF, which supports your brain plasticity. So basically it increases levels in your brain, your hippocampus, and your prefrontal cortex that are crucial for memory and cognition. So not just talking about sweating, it helps with cellular repair, cardiovascular, and neural protection. However, it's not just like one size fits all. It's not great for every single person to sauna.
Sure.
So men and women respond differently. For
when
men,
my wife and I get in there, yes. Yes, we do.
And men are simple and easier creatures. And so you typically have higher muscle mass, higher metabolic rate, less thyroid sensitivity, things like that. So for most men who are metabolically stable, like sauning is a great option. It can help improve insulin sensitivity. It supports testosterone through just like better metabolic health, enhances recovery so that the increased circulation from the heat delivers oxygen to your muscles, and it helps clear the metabolic waste after exercise as well. It reduces inflammation. Again, with those heat shock proteins and anti-inflammatory pathways, it helps just with that chronic inflammatory signaling, and it can improve sleep quality. For women, it can also has a lot of benefits, but we need to make sure that if a woman is under eating, low in ferritin, chronically sleep deprived, or adrenals are fatigued, that we'd have to just kind of look at that through a specific lens and make sure we're not just like blanket,
Sure.
But for women, the benefits that are more like tailored to them would be like cortisol. It helps with the stress response, the HPA axis. And then also the parasympathetic rebound. So a lot of people are in this flight or fright all the time.
Right.
And the sauna can help you get into that rest and digest state, which is difficult for some people to get there. So that's helpful. Also supporting detox pathways, obviously with the sweating, helping to support the liver and the lymphatic drainage process. So yeah, but circling back to the Finnish studies, frequency of this matters. Doing it once a month is not going to get you the same benefit. So the consistency is what's really important for that. So, but the heat is a stress signal. So always keeping that in mind if your body is not in a place where you should be doing that. Things you can do though, if you don't have a sauna at home or access to one, really hot baths, like a really hot bath, add some Epsom salt, magnesium there. It'll help your detoxing. That's one of the best things you can do at home if you're like it's not going to give you all of these benefits, but it is a helpful free at-home option.
Sure. And there are places you can go to sauna as well. You don't have to have an in-home. I know like House of Iron downtown has a sauna that, if you're a member there, you can use. And I think, there are options if you can't afford to purchase one, for
Absolutely.
sure. So that's significant though. Not just once a week or once a month in order to get the benefits. And I think that one of my problems, because we do have a sauna and we've had one for years, and it can take a while. It's not like other things where, like some of the other things we'll talk about, an ice bath, for instance, where that's just a couple minutes every day. Doing a sauna 3 to 4 times a week and in that 15 to 25 minute range. And I guess, are there variables within that as well when we're talking about a dry sauna versus a wet sauna versus an infrared sauna? Am I pushing on past where we're at here?
No, this is, it's such a big topic. Jeremy, I bought one of your old saunas.
Oh, that's right.
Right? And so that Sunlighten, which, we loved, but my husband, he's fortunate. He has a job that actually takes him to Finland. That's why we know so much about Finland often. And Tyler is very particular to the higher temperatures where the infrared we just don't get. So the infrared, there's like 3 types of like near, mid, and far infrared. Depending on the sauna manufacturer, somebody will say you need all 3. Some of them will say you just need, one type. And that data, it almost contradicts itself.
Sure.
And ultimately, like where I've landed is like sweating is still therapeutic.
Yep.
Most of us need help. I do know that 1 hour of sweating does enough filtration of your body that your kidneys do in 24 hours.
Wow.
And again, like sweating from exercise is also therapeutically beneficial. And we sweat because of the heat our skeletal muscle contracts. So heat is helpful. It is designed on purpose. God gave our body to sweat, to cool us down. We shiver when we're cold. So again, it is part of like a homeostasis or balance that God, does want in our body. But the infrared temperatures are really going to be between like 120 and 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, some people, they'll tell me like they get in the sauna and they sat at, 140 degrees, or like I barely broke a sweat. That can be a sign that they have some liver congestion, stuff like that, more like heavy metal toxicity. If people don't sweat, but they might report like, but I feel like I have a body odor, or I feel like I'll get a lot of wives, they'll be like, my husband's sweat, I can see it in the bed sheets. Like, what is going on with him? That just might be a sign that there's some like liver, gallbladder, congestion there, even though they might not have any other obvious and outright symptomatology. But majority actually of the research as it pertains to the Finnish studies or to any sort of sauna therapy is more in the higher temperature and not on the infrared saunas.
Sure.
So again, there's benefit for more, but the infrared saunas will get like that range of targeted is more of like the 160 to 210 degrees Fahrenheit. And so Tyler convinced me to convert. We sold then our sauna and then got then like a Finlayo, which is like a Finnish sauna. So we have those steam rocks. And
I love that too. We actually, at a previous house we lived in, we built a chicken coop, then our neighbors turned against us for wanting chickens. And so we had a friend come and build that, turn it into a sauna, and we put in multiple heaters. And
I think I bought your I bought your infrared sauna. Then you put in a wet sauna.
And now we're back to the infrared because we moved and it made more sense for us in our current situation. But I did love the wet sauna and pouring the water on the rocks, and I think having that added steam in the room does help to bring up the temperature. I'll say though, on the other hand, I would definitely get a great sweat out of that, staying there for 20, 30 minutes. It takes me longer to start to sweat in an infrared sauna, but I am definitely sweating more by the end of it than I was in the other.
Like a more robust sweat.
Like just rolling sweat. And so, there's a give take. But I think at the end of the day, as long as you're sweating. That's the...
And I do know, though, that on the infrared ones, there has been studies where they'll test the sweat composition. And that's when the infrared is the ones that can prove heavy metal detoxification from the sweat. So that's powerful where we don't necessarily see that. So it is a different type of sweat, even at the higher temperatures.
Yeah, because it's pushing through the skin, especially if you have, like ours has all three wavelengths. And so, and there's different... I actually created my own because the ones that were in there were like this one or that one or that one. And I was like, no, I would like to use them all. And so I just named it Burn Baby Burn. And, that's my game. So I love that. I think that, if you have an opportunity, especially in the winter months here in Iowa, when it's so cold and we're longing to be outside, it can be so refreshing, to do that. And again, if you can't have a sauna in your home, there are ways to go about doing that. There are gyms that have it, hot baths, and
there are sauna blankets. I haven't experimented enough on my own, but I know they're all over the internet. That and in my opinion, at a fairly reasonable price, especially with patients with like joint pain and autoimmune joint pains that can be wildly therapeutic from like the arthritis factor.
I got both of my parents a sauna blanket last Christmas actually because of like, my, just helping with like menopause symptoms, and my dad's got some joint stuff, and so they both have been loving it. There's just like that was a good in-home option.
Sure.
So sauna, it can feel draining also instead of restorative because heat's still a stress signal. It's just a controlled one, and I really do love the word controlled. There's something I think biblical about that. Discipline isn't about punishment; it's about refinement. Fire can purify, but too much fire destroys, right? So the question becomes, is this refining stress or is it a consuming stress? So let's talk about the other extreme, right? I mean, getting in a sauna, 160, 200 degrees, whatever. What about cold therapy? Dr. Calla, what does cold actually do, say, inside the body? Because we all know what it feels like to be cold. Like, let's talk about on a deeper level.
Yeah, sure. So I love cold plunges, cold plunging, and it can be something from full submersion to even just doing cold showers. But when you immerse into cold water, we get norepinephrine is going to increase dramatically. Dopamine rises and can stay elevated for hours. So those are the excitatory neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitters is like, think of the hormones of the brain, and we have excitatory neurotransmitters, and then we have inhibitory neurotransmitters. So sometimes, like if we need the pick me up, I had a patient a couple years ago, and there's some contraindications of like when not to do cold therapy in somebody who's chronically stressed, very depleted, extremely fatigued, and this young woman was, and it's contraindicated, but she had done literally everything else and nothing was moving the needle. And so we had in that room, we had both the cold plunge and the sauna, and I said, hey, we're going to do something that's maybe questionable, but I feel like we're in a safe enough and controlled enough environment, and I will pull you out. Like if all of a sudden, she collapses. But it literally felt like it was like a life a reset, because it was such a shock to her system. But like, I mean, to put it in perspective, over a 30-day period, she was only able to work 4 of those days due to this like extreme fatigue. And we didn't really know what. Yeah, it was really, really significant. So we put her in there. Our goal was 90 seconds. She lasted for 2 minutes, and then we got her in the sauna, and the sauna was hot, already warmed before she got in there. But like that extreme cold to, warmer and a slower, heat up, it gave her 48 hours of clarity that she was able to function. So again, that dopamine and norepinephrine to really kind of give it the shock. Our mitochondrial density can increase over time too. So the mitochondria, as we know, the mighty mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, when you can increase that density, you then increase its capacity and efficiency. But there's long-term inflammatory markers that can decrease, and then brown fat activates. So this is really important because brown fat is the helpful fat. This is the specialty type of fat that burns more calories than any other type of fat. And it's burning calories in order to produce heat. And it's rather storing energy rather than storing it. So like babies notoriously have tons of brown fat because they don't have the capacity in the skeletal muscle to shiver. So that's where the brown fat for babies. And that's why, again, we're just like, are they eating? Are they getting enough nourishment so that then that brown fat can be protective for them? So it's like a non-shivering type of thermogenesis, and this helps regulate body temperature, especially when you're exposed to cold. So what makes brown fat exciting from a health perspective is that it can actually improve your metabolic function. So as we age, we lose that brown fat, and we do a really great job of storing the white fat. The not friendly, doesn't look good, naked sort of fat. But when we do this extreme of like a cold therapy, it's a metabolically active tissue. And so when you use it, you protect it and store it. And so that's kind of exciting. But again, cold exposure can improve metabolic flexibility, increase as well that mitochondria density, and improve insulin sensitivity and enhance glucose regulation. And again, it's that challenge of the cold that your body metabolism just gets stirred in a way that when we remain normal temperature, doesn't get challenged. So there's more and more research showing improvements in this insulin response in cold adapted individuals as well over time, especially how, patients will ask me like, is this a fad or is this going to be here, for the long haul? And I'm like, I don't think it's going to be here as a fad. I think it's, for the long haul.
Well, people that do it seem to really love it. It's a love-hate relationship to some degree, but I think it's going to stick around. When you do it and you're committed to it, you start to see the benefits of it and feel the benefits of it. It's hard to stop.
Yeah, sure. And you follow Andrew Huberman.
Yep.
Yeah. And so he's got a nice 90-minute to 2-hour podcast that really goes down to the nitty-gritty. He argues in there that based on the current research and evidence that nothing beyond 2 minutes of this cold immersion, he's like, you lose all therapeutic benefit. I don't think the studies have been out to show some of the mental health about being able to be okay and talk yourself into being okay when you have this cold immersion. So Jeremy, maybe in your own words, do you remember the very first time you cold plunged?
Yes. So, okay. And it was traumatic.
In what way was it traumatic?
Well, the first time we did it, I was living at the house that we turned the chicken coop into the sauna, and we had an ice barrel.
Sure.
We now have a different unit that actually keeps the water consistent, and that's amazing. We would fill it every time. We would use the sauna 2, 3, 4 days a week, usually 2 or 3, and then put fresh water into this thing and then dump 10 pounds of ice into it. And then we would do the sauna for 30 minutes and then get right into the ice bath. And the, heat to cold and even cold to heat, like you were saying, it is so overwhelming, but within moments that endorphins,
Yeah.
all your body just starts to settle into it. It takes 10 to 15 seconds. And then you just start to feel amazing.
Yeah.
And I think, like, I've heard the 2-minute mark as well. I do cold therapy, cold plunges 6 days a week right now.
Sure.
I'm doing it for 3 minutes in the morning, almost first thing. And there are times when I'll go 4 or 5. Not because I'm thinking it's giving me the extra, specific health benefits like, you just kind of went over, but because I'm warring against something and I'm winning a battle that my mind wants to lose.
Yes.
And I feel stronger on the other side because of that. I really do. I think that in that mental health conversation, there's something to be said for conquering, your fight or flight. I want to get out of the water as soon as I step into it. But I will say I was sick, 2 weeks ago.
Sure.
And when you're not well, it's hard to get into the cold bath. And so
Sure.
I actually took some time off for the first time in a while. And getting back into it this week was pretty tough.
Sure.
It was almost like I was starting over. And
Sure.
I was
Like
kind
you
of
deconditioned that fast.
I was kind of excited about that.
Sure.
Because I got to the point where, I keep it, right around 40 degrees, and some days I'll get down there to be 37, some days it's 43,
Sure.
depending on when the cooler ran last or whatever. But I could just sit down in it and, have a conversation on the phone. And
Sure.
now, no, don't call me in the morning.
Sure.
You're starting all over. And I think the body, actually, it seems like maybe it needs that. Maybe I was doing it too much. And so I'm really interested in, some of that side of it as well.
Well, I think you'll be able to see too, like on your wearable, like what the
Right.
data is and the metrics. Like when we first brought the cold plunge to our office, it was really cool to see people who had never cold plunged before, and then they would do a series, just how they could see it in their metrics. Like it does not deny that they would get more deep, more REM, would probably, have more caloric expenditure just because of the degree of shivering afterwards. So the
It
first
does
time.
take a little while to warm up.
Yeah, the first time I did it, I was at my buddy's practice in New Mexico, and it was like 103 degrees outside that day.
Oh, wow.
And so we did it like several times. We were going between the cold plunge, then the sauna, then you'd quick shower, then, kind of do it over again through a series. And my buddy, he's a really nice guy, and he's like, hey, do you want to burn body fat? And I'm like, are you stupid? Duh.
Like, who doesn't want to do that?
Yeah. And he's like, hey, so I'm going to challenge you. And he goes, on your last one, see if you can't do it as long as humanly possible. Like go way beyond the 2 minutes. And then don't take a warm shower, don't get in the sauna, and just let your degree of shivering for the rest of the day see how that. And like we got into this car that had been sitting there for 4 hours in 102 degrees in New Mexico.
Wow.
And I'm like, do not turn on the AC. Like I was still so cold. But yeah, it was pretty powerful. But I was at this gym where there's a bunch of meatheads, and I was like, I need to beat all of these guys. And I was very proud. I lasted about 15 and a half minutes.
Wow.
I know it was a bragging right. I apologize.
I know. Wow, you just raised the bar. Dang it, now I'm going to have to set the timer. All right.
Yeah, a cool challenge. But so back to the mental health thing. I mean, some of the things that I think is important that maybe hasn't been in the peer-reviewed studies yet, but what I think is important to remember is that when you do something that physiologically your body gets into, every single cell in your body says, freak out, you're being attacked by a cheetah.
Right.
But when you can mentally re-engage yourself and say, I am okay, and like slow down your breath when every single cell of your body wants to jump out of that cold, that's where I think the mental win happens.
Yeah.
And, when we would have kids and student athletes get in there, we'd get a lot of pictures, and I'd want them to get way down low and get their shoulders under there. And I would say, like, think about it on the mound, think about the strike zone, where they're visualizing what they're doing. Or like when I had Cooper and his buddy in the cold plunge, I would be quizzing them on math or because, the brain of like what you can do when your body is physiologically stressed out. So then as a pitcher, when you're on the mound, that is mentally, physiologically stressful to be then that accurate on the mound as a pitcher. Or if you're a student trying to memorize things, when your body is okay, I mean, that's how they train the military.
Right.
Under very extreme stressful situations. They don't train for a day in the park.
A walk in the park, yeah.
That they are constantly putting them in those stressful situations so that they can perform better. And that's where I think the mental gain is going to come from doing something that physiologically your body is saying, get the heck out of here.
Right. Yeah. And I've even seen the effects of, like you're talking about, fat burning and all of those kinds of things. I mean, I've watched my body go through quite a transformation over the last 8 months, and there's probably a lot involved in that. It's a lot more than just cold therapy and sauna therapy, but the right diet, the right workout program, the right mindset, even my time spent in the Word, time before the Lord. I think all of that has to play. But my body has gone through a significant, almost even like, and I don't know the science of this at all, but I feel like my skin is even thinned, where I'm more vascular.
Sure.
I'm 54 years old, and it's interesting to see muscle definition and things that you haven't seen in years. And I haven't really wildly changed my workout program or anything like that. So it is definitely a really intriguing area. There's also an interesting study, a professor out of Arizona State University, I can't think of his name, wasn't ready to share this, but he did a really interesting study, and it's kind of ongoing, where he ended up through a series of just working through data on his own, because he had a prostate cancer issue, and so he was using the sauna to try to shrink that before they were going to do some kind of medical intervention. And when he went back after doing it was several months of sauna, his testosterone levels were much higher than they were when he was previously tested before starting that. And it sent him on a journey. He's a professor of physiology, and he's like, well, that's it. I got to figure this out.
Yeah.
And he has a really interesting, there's several podcasts on it, but a lot of peer-reviewed data. And he's even created his own cold plunge now. It's one of only 2 in the world, I believe, that every time you get in, you have to break the ice. It has a cooler that's that strong, because he really believes that like those extreme cold levels are where that greatest healing power is at. But they figured out through the study with different peer groups, some doing cold therapy after workouts and some doing it immediately before workouts, that the people that were doing cold therapy after workouts, their testosterone levels were actually going down.
Yeah.
And people doing cold therapy before a workout, their testosterone levels were actually going up.
Yeah.
And so as soon as my 15-year-old heard that, but he was like, I'm not really cold therapy. Now he does it before he works out every time, But I've noticed a significant change in my testosterone levels through that as well. So.
Sure. Well, and I think too, with just, again, observationally in these pitchers, and so as baseball and softball, they'd come in and then they would go to their pitching lesson and they were throwing harder. I mean, they had the data metrics because they were, doing the speed harder and more accurate. And so it was kind of the mindset shift of typically you think, ice after for the recovery. And it's like, you can do it before. And that kind of leads into this like whole top of like hormesis or hormetic effect. So whether it's just, again, I love the combination of both hot and cold, both serve like a purpose. I think if somebody is brand new, has a very sedentary lifestyle, hasn't been doing any of this yet, typically it's easier to jump into like sauna and sweating therapy versus going,
100%.
Towards the cold. But I do like, again, he doesn't always have a lot of appropriate language, but Wim Hof, I know that there's a lot of information on Wim and his breathing, but he does a lot of this cold therapy without calling it cold therapy.
Okay.
But it has a lot to do with like breathing during uncomfortable situations. But the Wim Hof, he's got like a shower challenge. So it's over a 4-week period where you take your shower as normal, and then the last 15 seconds you go to all cold water for 15 seconds and try to get the full submersion. Yeah. Then the next week you go to 30 seconds, then 45, then for a minute. So that's an easy way for people to start introducing this at home and get some of this benefit. But where the hormesis concept comes in, it's just a small controlled stress on the body that can trigger a beneficial adaptive response. So the most common way that we see this is when athletes go train in Colorado with the altitude training. So they'll go up to a lower altitude, lower oxygen availability, train really hard, and then they don't get that benefit until they go back to their normal altitude or sea level.
Right.
So that's like kind of one of the first examples of like hormesis. But if you are standing here and then jump into a cold plunge and then come out, that net change of normal temperature to extreme cold, then from extreme cold to the net room temperature, that's that hormesis. And so hormesis can stimulate, as it pertains to hot and cold, you get vasodilation when it's cold, so the vessels all shrink up. When you get in cold, all of your core blood runs to your heart and lungs to preserve as much as it can, so all of your extremities lose that. But then when you get out, the vasodilation, as your body heat is increasing, then that's where you get then the hyperoxygenated blood to all of your extremities and to your brain. That's why you get that refreshing feeling as well. So again, you can get that hormetic effect just only doing cold therapy or just doing heat therapy. But when you get the extremes of extreme heat to extreme cold, then it's just like you're amped up a little bit higher.
I felt that. It's nice to know there's a name for it. Hormesis.
Hormesis,
All right, I've added to my knowledge for the day. That's amazing. So heat strengthens through warmth, cold strengthens through challenge, and both require stress. What if the body doesn't need more stress? What if it needs more energy? Brittany, can we talk a little bit about red light therapy?
Yeah, absolutely. I like talking about this because I think if you're into holistic things at all on your social media, you're just going to see like ads, and like your favorite influencer is going to be pushing like all these different devices. So it's helpful to know like, okay, there's a lot of people who are skeptical if this even works, and there's different types of lights. And so red light therapy uses specific wavelengths of red and near infrared light. So typically between 6 and 900 nanometers. So if you're going to be investing in one, you want to make sure you're getting the right kind.
Right. I recently read that there's a lot of systems on the market that aren't hitting these numbers, and people are just buying basically infrared lights that they should be lining their kid's bedroom with, not. And I don't think that's a good idea to line your kid's bedroom with those. But that's interesting.
So the wavelengths are important. So making sure you do your research on what kind you're getting. But they're unique because they can penetrate the skin and into the tissues, which is going to get into the cells. And that's kind of the whole point, right? Specifically the mitochondria, which we love to talk about, right? So that energy, most of the things that most people are trying to do, like all of these hacks, like we're trying to get more energy, we're trying to feel better, like that fundamentally, right? And so
without a gallon of coffee in the afternoon.
So we want to like just boost our body's natural energy system. So within the mitochondria, that light interacts with the enzymes called cytochrome C oxidase, which is basically the end step in the mitochondria's process to make energy. Okay, so that's the last step. So that light interacts with it and it improves the efficiency of it. So it makes your mitochondria be able to make energy easier and better. So that produces ATP, which is our energy, right?
Sure.
So unlike things like sauna and cold exposure, that's a stressor. This works by supporting your cells. So it's not a stress. It's just kind of helps your cells to function better, create more energy. So repair directly doesn't trigger like a cortisol or a stress response, things like that. So this is, I want to say safer, but maybe a better option for some people if they're not in a place where sauning or cold plunging is appropriate.
Yeah.
So what happens at the cellular level? So the ATP production rate, increases. But the nitric oxide signaling also improves. So that promotes vasodilation and cellular signaling. We get a decrease in inflammation. If you've heard of the term like cytokines, they're basically signaling proteins by the immune system. And so that helps decrease the inflammatory ones. So that's going to help cellular repair. Your blood flow improves, reactive oxygen species. So this kind of gets into a little nitty gritty about like if you've heard of oxidative stress. So basically in your cells, when your cells make energy, they also make waste. Okay, but your body has a built-in system to deal with that waste. Some people's enzymes are not sufficient. So it's like rust, essentially. Your cells are you're creating too much, and now the surface of the cell no longer looks healthy, and then your immune system attacks it because it's like, what's going on in the cell? It doesn't look good because your body hasn't been able to handle that byproduct well. This helps with that. So it's helping so that we don't have those byproducts that make our cells look unhealthy. So research is growing, showing the benefits of red light therapy, things that helps with like wound healing, joint pain, inflammation reduction. So again, those inflammatory pathways, it's really helpful for increasing antioxidant activity. A lot of if you've see those red light masks, those are popular because of the collagen production and the skin health. So women a lot are like, okay, how do I look younger? How do I get rid of these lines? So why it works is it stimulates a fibroblast in the dermis. So it increases your collagen and your elastin in your skin. So with that increase, it supports skin regeneration, reduces your fine lines, and just overall like skin tone and healing. So for vanity's sake, that is why a lot of people will use red light. But then for more like practical, like muscle recovery, it increases your blood flow to help clear out byproducts when you're exercising, to help support repair and reducing that post-exercise soreness. And then a lot of people, this is kind of like growing if you follow functional medicine and things, thyroid support. So the red light, it's the same mechanism, right? We're still trying to help the mitochondria, but you put the red light actually over your thyroid. And so that's going to help the mitochondria in the tissue specific there. So a lot of people with Hashimoto's, so antibodies against their thyroid, they're finding that this is really helpful for just that inflammation.
Sure.
And then another one is like the hair growth. It stimulates your hair cells. And so blood flow to the scalp, things like that, helps shift your hair follicles from the resting phase into the active phase. So people have been using that for that as well. But it's also, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, well, you're even starting to see, like you mentioned, the masks. I saw one, the sauna that we use is Sunlighten, and they have a mask that is has red light, but it also has blue and yellow and green. And there are some variables within each of those color spectrums that have some really fascinating interactions for skin health and acne control and things like that. So it's such a fascinating area. I love to learn about how the body heals and the kinds of things that the Lord's created. You know, man didn't create this stuff. You know, these things exist in the light spectrum already. Actually, when you talk to or even listen to podcasters who are in the medical fields that, you know, really focus on these areas of study, they'll tell you, you know, yeah, get a red light bed if you can. You know, problem is, like, if you get one, like a commercial red light bed can be $150,000. You know, who can do that? You know, there's a way to just go out into the sunlight and at the right times of day, probably closer to the equator. But it's also fascinating because it's not something that, oh, well, man just came up with this idea. God's had this as part of his, you know, program and plan for us from the beginning. We're just finally able to kind of enter into this phase of it. And so I think for me, that's what's so fascinating about it.
Yeah, absolutely. All of the best therapies, like everything we talk about, heat, cold, light, this is all God's design. Man has never created anything that's worth anything, right? All, going back to the basics is always the best. One other fun thing I wanted to include about the red light is it's been studied in traumatic brain injuries to help with cognitive decline. The light can actually penetrate the skull and reach the brain tissue. So some people with like TBIs, it may improve the actual, like the ATP, so the energy production. So that helps the injured neurons and it reduces inflammation, enhances neurogenesis, which is like creating new neurons, synapse. So like how your neurons communicate to each other helps repair that communication. So that helps with cognition, memory, recovery, all of that. So that's a really I think there's newer research on that. But
that's incredibly valuable. I mean, you're hearing more and more about these kinds of injuries. And so additional ways to treat them, boy, I mean, stack them up. That's amazing. So if sauna builds resilience through heat, and cold builds resilience through stress, and red light builds resilience through energy, then let's get into this next subject, PEMF. You know, it builds resilience through what? Through communication. And so, Dr. Calla, can you talk to us about that? Maybe take us into the frequency range, because this is an area I'm really fascinated by. There's a lot of data out there. You know, the guys like Gary Brecka and these people are always talking about this. So I'm really interested to hear your heart.
Yeah, so PEMF stands for pulsed electromagnetic field therapy. So unlike hot or cold, PEMF is not a primarily like as a stressor. And oftentimes, well, Jeremy, I know that you have one. You might not necessarily like feel that it's even turned on other than you see the light that is on. Yeah,
there's one way to test it with a little magnet.
Sure.
And so you do that once in a while and make sure it, you know, right out of the box, make sure it worked. But when you're sitting on it, no, you know, laying on it, it's a mat.
Yeah, so basically pulsed is it's like a changing in frequency. It's not a steady stream of frequency. And so again, you can play around with the different frequencies for different target organ tissues, but in general, it's pulse. When you are on a PEMF mat, it sends pulses into the body to stimulate and support normal cellular function. So every cell carries an electrical charge, and when the cells are stressed, injured, or inflamed, their electrical activity can be disrupted. So oftentimes, like, I think conventional medicine will think this is woo-woo, and it's not. And the reason why it's not, like if you go back to high school chemistry and you look at the periodic table, I think I pulled it up here even just to kind of like refresh, like every atom has a charge and there's positive and negative charges. Sure. And that's how the bonds form. You can't have two, like if you think of a battery, or a magnet, and you put like the opposing sides, they will give you, and you can feel that's an electrical force, man-made, not man-made, God-made. Right. And so again, when we think, what are we? We're all made up of atoms. Every single thing around us is made up of atoms. And so there's all these positive and negative charges, and that frequency can 100% get disrupted. Poor diet, lack of sleep can get your body incredibly inflamed. And so that's where PEMF can really gently, without the use of a medication, I have never heard of a study or proof that PEMF has ever harmed anyone.
Right.
Same thing with hot or cold. Yes, you can get cold, you can get frostbite, you can get burned by heat, but like when it comes to PEMF and red light, so incredibly harmless, but it's crazy to me how much sometimes conventional providers will be like, that's woo-woo, I don't believe it. The other thing too that kind of stands against us, or we'll get conventional pushback, is they're like, well, let me see the 10,000 participant study. Let me see all the biomarkers. Well, we can't patent PEMF. We can't patent cold and hot therapy. And so we're never going to get the big studies that pharma usually funds their own studies for. So again, I don't mean to get off on my tangent there, but again, I just, in case everybody's like, I don't know, this is witchcraft and woo.
I don't think it's a tangent, because when I talk to people, I keep mine in the house, and someone will come over and they're like, what's that? No, it's pulse electromagnetic field. They're like, I thought you weren't supposed to be near EMFs. I didn't say it. And so you get into that, but the conversation always ends up with, well, show me the data. Show me the peer-reviewed study.
Yeah.
Well, let's get the FDA to be interested in something they can't make $1 billion on, and we can do that.
Sure. Well, there's a guy at the gym that I work out with, and he's all into this, and he even got like a grounding mat, and he was talking about it. Some of the guys at the gym were making fun of being like, oh, it's woo woo, you got your wide toe box shoes, and they're giving him a hard time. And then he's like, hey, my Oura ring literally showed me that my heart rate variability went up after we got the grounding pillows. He goes out of town, doesn't have his grounding sheets, grounding pillow, and his Oura, it was showing it. So we have the wearables that can prove this is being therapeutic and helpful for anybody at any given time. So I look forward to what your data is showing you.
Yeah, I have a grounding mat that is on my bed when I sleep.
Sure.
And I also have a grounding blanket. Like, if I do end up watching TV, I have a blanket that I can, and you don't feel a difference, but over time, your body definitely reflects the advantage of the pulsed electromagnetic fields.
Yeah.
It's really a fascinating area.
But to kind of, back to the EMF, because it says PEMF. So again, to kind of differentiate between the two, the PEMF is that targeted low frequency electromagnetic pulses that are intentionally designed to interact with the body in a therapeutic way. These pulses are delivered in specific patterns and strengths that support cellular signaling, circulation, tissue repair, and inflammation reduction. Now, the opposite, we do have toxic or environmental EMFs, and they come from sources like cell phones, Wi-Fi routers, Bluetooth devices, and power lines. These exposures are typically continuous, unregulated, and at higher frequency, and they are not designed to interact with the body therapeutically. Instead of supporting cellular function, a chronic exposure may contribute with cellular stress to some individuals. So some people are very, very EMF sensitive. Some people don't recognize it. Brittany and I work with a provider that if she were to wear an Apple Watch, it would trigger a 5-day migraine. She's very EMF sensitive. In fact, she does better when she wears magnets that help repel, which again might sound hippy-dippy, kind of crazy, but it is a true and real thing. And so people often say that. They're like, ooh, I thought we weren't supposed to have that. But it's based on the type of wavelength. But for men and women, it influences that ion channel activity, the calcium signaling, again, the mitochondrial ATP and inflammatory pathways. PMF for women can be incredibly helpful with that postpartum recovery, that tissue change of growing a baby, making a baby with your body. And then again, depending on how baby was brought into this world, if it was C-section or medicated births, just some of that tissue on how their tissue responds after doing that can be wildly helpful. And again, it's non-toxic. Yeah. It's, not any sort of medication or anti-inflammatory medication. Very, very gentle, but great also with chronic inflammation, joint pain, and then nervous system regulation. So again, we're so electrically charged. HRV is the best way to say how balanced is your nervous system from fight or flight versus rest or digest. So again, when we say nervous system regulation, sometimes it's more of like that harmonizing balance that PEMF can then provide. And then again, sleep quality.
That's something I noticed almost immediately.
Sure.
Actually, the first time I was introduced to a PEMF mat, I was at my dad's house in Arizona, my dad and mom, and a functional medicine doctor there had suggested he get one because of the health issues that he's going through and that it might help with a variety of things. And it did. And I was visiting and he said, oh, you got to try it. And, there's a bunch of different settings, and I chose just like I'll just start with this and one, wellness and one.
Yeah.
And I, sat on it while we talked, and I got up to leave because he's getting older and he's tired easy. And so I was like, well, I'll just go back to go grab some food at the restaurant, whatever it was. And I was so tired because the channel that I chose was specifically, it would aid in better sleep. Oh. And, no one, I should have read the manual
Yeah,
maybe.
sure,
but
sure.
I got to the car and went, I don't know if I'm okay to drive.
Sure, it was that
significant.
sedative.
It was.
Yeah.
And so I actually reached out. I got really interested in, well, what else does this thing do? Because that wasn't, turns out I went back and talked to him. He's like, well, that's not the one I use. Well, thanks, Dad. How about,
Right,
you
right.
know? And so, I started talking to him, well, why did you buy it? And let me learn more about it. And he actually got me in touch with, the guy's name is Franz. It's a Sedona wellness company. And the creator of it, he is from Sweden, but lives in Dubai.
Sure.
And he'll call you up and have just the most
Lovely
lengthy
conversation.
and detailed conversations. What's going on in your body? Oh, you should use this setting. Use it for this many days, and then use that setting. And so I ended up buying one for myself.
Sure.
And I'll tell you, for years and years and years of my life, I have had the hardest time going to sleep at night. I'm a thinker, and it's hard to
Brain's
shut
going.
off my mind.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I will use it for at the end of the day, just that last half hour of your day, everything's quiet. I can sit on that and we'll go into the bedroom and lay in the bed and almost immediately be out and in deep sleep. And it's really a phenomenal tool. It does, like we've talked about, there's so many other incredible benefits to it.
Yeah.
But it, for me, has been incredibly helpful on several levels. But that one, I think, has been the most obvious, jump off the page, how incredible that sleep quality.
How many
can be.
settings do you have on yours?
So there's 3 different main channel settings, and then within each of those, there's 8 to 10.
Does it go by hertz? So 1 to 10, 10 to 20?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm taught that 1 to 10 is that recovery and relaxation. So that's probably
there
that
you
first
go.
setting that you were on.
Yep.
And then the 10 to 20 is circulation and tissue repair. So think rotator cuff, sprained ankle, stuff like that. And then depending on maybe on the pain relief, the 20 to 50 is more musculoskeletal support. 50 to 75 bone and structure. So if there's a lot of osteoarthritis or a bone fracture. And then the 100 plus hertz is more of that cellular activation performance. But again, then you want to be smart about your timing. You don't,
Right.
even if you need performance, you don't want to do that right before bed.
Right.
You want to do that maybe before the workout or first thing in the morning. But then kind of on that, have you ever heard about, I think it's pronounced binaural beats. So this is more about auditory
No.
frequencies. So similar to that, you can do, and I've actually sent patients hyperlinks from YouTube. There's people on YouTube that have produced this type of music or wavelength of delta, theta, alpha, beta, and gamma.
Wow.
And it's using a different type of wavelengths, 0.5 to 4 hertz for deep sleep and physical restoration, theta waves for 4 to 8 hertz, which is more meditation, prayer, creativity, and deep relaxation. Alpha is this calm focus and stress reduction, which is the 8 to 12, and then you go to 12 to 30 for alertness and concentration, and then the gamma is for higher cognitive. So a lot of my patients that have ADD, ADHD that don't want to be medicated, it's hey, in the background, why don't you have that higher frequency gamma noise or music going on? But if you're trying to wind down, let's then put you in delta.
Wow, that's fascinating.
I'll send you some stuff.
Yeah, I would. Just send me a link to buy it. Yeah.
Well, and it's all, this is all free.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, it's amazing, how much is really out there when it comes to better living, a better quality of life, tending well to the, gift that we've been given, this shell that we walk through, we only get so many years on planet Earth, Psalm 91, there's a passage that says, teach us to number our days that we might apply ourselves unto wisdom. And, the fact is, the average individual, lifespan in America today is 78-ish years, and it ebbs and flows a little bit on a variety of factors. But we just don't get that much time. And so the time that we do have, we want to use it to the best of our ability. And we want to honor God with that time, which means honoring the body, the temple that he gave us to walk around planet Earth in. And, to be the best representation of the gift that he's given us. And, it's why I love these conversations so much. It's why I believe it's so important to, get good sleep, eat whole foods, move, you guys, get outside and move, spend that time in the sun, take your shoes off and connect to the earth. There's a whole grounding conversation in that is undeniable and of the utmost importance. And people just don't do it anymore. A well-regulated nervous system is a well-regulated lifestyle. And I think, our lives are better off because we put the time and energy in to do that. And I get that this might seem overwhelming to some folks. We spent years, I know you guys have spent years and years of your lives just digging into all of this. For me, it's more of the last, couple of years. I've not spent decades of my life in pursuit of wellness and godly living and, a good physical specimen or whatever. But as I get older, I see so much more the importance of, just having that, I don't have to look so great. I want to feel good. I want to live long, and I want those around me to have that experience. And, gosh, you're the CEO of your own little ecosystem there, this gift that God has given you. And you're going to choose how you're going to, what you get out, what you put in, and I'd encourage you guys out there, put in the effort, dig into some of this information, do your own research. There's a ton of data out there on these conversations. Get in touch with these incredible ladies. They have a system set up and a way to help you through those stages. They've been incredibly beneficial to me. And I know so many people in this community and even neighboring communities and other states even. So, doesn't matter where you're at. If you have the opportunity, I'd highly encourage you to reach out because, you only get to live this life one time. Live it well. God bless you guys.
Thanks for joining us today on Whole Health. If you'd like to learn more about our program, have a question for our hosts, or want to find past episodes, just head to wholehealthlive.com.